One day, Pharaoh Senosiris was sitting in the audience hall of his palace at Memphis. The court was assembled before him princes, military leaders, and the high-ranking officials of Egypt, each standing in his proper place. Suddenly, someone approached the pharaoh and said, "A messenger from Ethiopia has arrived. He carries a sealed letter." The man was brought into the hall. He greeted the court and declared, "Who here in Egypt can read the letter I bring to Pharaoh without breaking its seal? Who can understand the writing inside without opening it? If there is no skilled scribe or learned man in Egypt who can do this, I will report Egypt's inferiority to my homeland, the land of the black people." When Pharaoh and his court heard this, they were stunned and speechless. They asked among themselves, "By the life of Ptah, the great god, is it truly possible for a scribe or magician to read the contents of a sealed letter without opening it?" Then Pharaoh said, "Summon my son, Satme." They hurried to fetch him. Satme arrived quickly, bowed low before Pharaoh, paid homage, then rose and praised his father. Pharaoh said, "My son Satme, have you heard the challenge this Ethiopian has brought before us? He asks whether there is anyone in Egypt who can read the letter in his hand without breaking the seal, someone who can know its contents without opening it." As Satme heard these words, he too was struck with amazement and said, "My lord, who could possibly read a letter without opening it? Still, grant me 10 days to try. Perhaps I can find a way to prevent Egypt from being shamed in the eyes of the Ethiopians, those who chew gum." Pharaoh agreed and said, "The 10 days are granted to my son Satme." A place was prepared for the Ethiopian to stay, and he was served food in the manner of his homeland. Meanwhile, Pharaoh left the court deeply troubled, and he lay down. Refusing to eat or drink, Satme returned to his chambers, still so troubled he didn't even feel connected to the world around him. He wrapped himself completely in his garments, and lay down, lost in thought. When his wife, Mahitshwashket, was told of his condition, she came to his side. She gently touched him through the fabric and said, "My brother Satme, your body shows no fever, your limbs are not stiff. What ails you is a sorrow of the heart." He replied, "Leave me, my sister Mahitshwashket. The burden weighing on my heart is not something that should be shared with a woman." Then their young son Senosiris entered. He bent over his father and asked, "Father Satme, why are you lying here with such a heavy heart? Share your worries with me, so I can help take them away." But Satme answered, "Leave me, my child. The things troubling me are beyond your years." Senosiris insisted, "Please, tell me. Maybe I can ease your heart." Satme finally said, "My son, a man from Ethiopia has come to Egypt with a sealed letter. He has challenged us, saying, 'Is there anyone here who can read this letter without breaking the seal? If not, I will report Egypt's weakness to my homeland.' Has troubled me deeply, my son." When Senosiris heard this, he burst out laughing. Satme, surprised, asked, "Why are you laughing?" Senosiris replied, "I laugh because you are so worried over something so small. Get up, father. I will read the letter that was brought to Egypt without opening it, and I will tell you what is written inside without breaking the seal." Satme rose quickly and asked, "What proof do you have for these bold words?" "My son," Senosiris said, "go to the ground floor of our house, take out any scroll from its container, and I will tell you which book it is. I will read it aloud, without ever opening it." Satme did as his son said, and everything Senosiris promised he accomplished. He identified and read each book correctly without opening them. Satme, overwhelmed with joy, went up from the lower chambers, happier than he had ever been. Without delay, he went straight to Pharaoh and reported everything Senosiris had said and done. Pharaoh was overjoyed and celebrated the news with Satme. He invited Senosiris to join the feast, and they all spent a joyful day together, drinking and rejoicing. The next morning, Pharaoh gathered with his nobles in the audience hall. He ordered that the Ethiopian be brought before him. The man arrived, standing in the center of the court, still carrying the sealed letter. Senosiris also entered and stood beside him. Then he spoke directly to the man. "Woe to you, Ethiopian, enemy of Egypt, whom even your god Ammon has turned against. You have dared to enter Egypt, the flourishing garden of Osiris, the throne of Raharmachis, the bright horizon of the good God, claiming that you would expose Egypt's weakness to your own land. May Ammon curse you for your arrogance. Now, as I recite the words written in that letter. Be warned, do not deny a single word of it before Pharaoh." When the Ethiopian saw the young Senosiris standing in the court, he bowed low, touching his head to the ground. He said, "Everything you say, I will confirm. I will not deny a single word of it." This is the beginning of the tale told by Senosiris, spoken aloud in the court before Pharaoh and his nobles, with all the people of Egypt listening. He read the writing from the sealed letter carried by the Ethiopian standing in the center of the court. The letter said, "One day, during the reign of Pharaoh Menakfer Siamanoa, kind and generous king who ruled over all Egypt, under whose reign the land prospered, and the great temples flourished with abundant offerings and magnificent work, something unusual occurred. The king of the land of the Negroes was resting during his midday nap in Amon's pleasure pavilion. As he lay there, he overheard voices coming from a house behind him. It was the voices of 3 Ethiopian sorcerers speaking among themselves. The first one said, "If Amon would grant me his protection so that the king of Egypt could not harm me, I would cast my spells over Egypt and plunge the land into darkness for 3 days and 3 nights, so that no one would see the light." The second one said, "If Amon protected me so that Pharaoh could not touch me, I would use my magic to bring the king of Egypt to our land, whip him with 500 lashes in public before my king, and return him to Egypt within 6 hours, no more." The third one said, "If Amon would protect me from Pharaoh, I would use my spells to stop Egypt's fields from producing crops for 3 full years." When the king of Ethiopia heard what the 3 sorcerers had said, he summoned them and asked, "Who among you claimed he could darken Egypt for 3 days and nights?" They answered, "That was Horus, son of Tririt." He then asked, "Who said he would drag Pharaoh to the land of the Negroes, whip him publicly with 500 strokes, and return him in 6 hours?" They replied, "That was Horus, son of Tanaset." Then he asked, "Who said he would prevent Egypt's fields from bearing crops for 3 years?" They said, "That was Horus, son of Trifet." The king then turned to Horus, son of Tanaset, and said, "Show me your power. Perform the magical act as it is written in your book of spells, and by Amon, the sacred bull of Meru. My God, if you succeed, I will reward you generously." Horus, the son of Tanaset, crafted a litter made of wax, designed for forebearers. He spoke magical words over it, breathed life into it with force, and brought the figures to life. Then he gave them orders. "You will go to Egypt and bring back the Pharaoh to the king here. He shall receive 500 lashes with the curbash in public before the king, and then you will return him to Egypt Hall within 6 hours, no more." The bearers replied, "We will not fail in anything." And so the sorceries of the Ethiopian entered Egypt. They took control of the night and overpowered Pharaoh Menakfer Siamano. They carried him off to the land of the Negroes, king's court. There they flogged him with the curbash 500 strokes publicly, before the king then returned him to Egypt. The entire journey completed in 6 hours. Senosiris told this story in the middle of the court, in front of Pharaoh and his nobles, while all of Egypt listened in silence. He declared, "May the wrath of Amen, your God, fall upon you. Are not these the very words written in the letter you carry?" The Ethiopian replied, "Keep reading. All you have said is true, every word of it." Senosiris continued, addressing Pharaoh. After these events, Pharaoh Siamanu was returned to Egypt. His body was covered in bruises, and he collapsed in the shrine of the city of Horus, his back severely wounded from the blows. When morning came, Pharaoh asked his courtiers, "What happened in Egypt that I should be taken from it like that?" Ashamed and confused, the courtiers whispered among themselves, "Perhaps Pharaoh has lost his senses." They answered him, "Carefully, you are safe. Pharaoh, our great lord, Isis, the great goddess, will ease your pain." "But what do you mean by these strange words, my lord? You are here in the city of Horus under divine protection." Then Pharaoh stood and revealed his back to them, bruised and broken. He said, "By the life of Ptah, the great god, I was taken to the land of the Negroes during the night. I was beaten with 500 lashes before the king and brought back to Egypt Hall within 6 hours." When they saw the terrible bruises on Pharaoh's body, the courtiers cried out in horror. Now Pharaoh Menakfer Siamanu had a chief master of magical knowledge named Horus, son of Penishi, a man of great wisdom. When he came and saw the king's condition, he let out a loud cry and said, "My lord, this is the work of Ethiopian sorcery. By the life of your house, I will drag them to your chamber of torture and execution." Pharaoh answered, "Do it quickly before I am taken away to the land of the Negroes again tonight." Horus, son of Penishi and master of the sacred mysteries, went immediately to Pharaoh. He brought with him his magical texts and protective amulets. Reading a spell aloud, he placed an amulet on Pharaoh to shield him from the Ethiopian sorceries. Then he left Pharaoh's presence, took his incense burners and libation vessels, boarded a boat, and set out at once for Kamunu. Upon reaching Kamunu, he entered the temple and presented incense and water before Thoth, the great god of wisdom and magic, lord of Hermopolis. Kneeling in prayer, he said, "Turn your gaze toward me, Lord Thoth, so that Egypt will not be disgraced before the land. Of the Negroes, you are the one who created magic through spells, who hung the sky, established the earth and the underworld, and placed the gods among the stars. Show me the way to protect Pharaoh from these Ethiopian enchantments." That night Horus slept. In the temple, and in his dreams, the figure of Thoth appeared and spoke. "Are you not Horus, son of Penishi, keeper of Pharaoh Menakfer, Sayamanu's mysteries? Then listen. Tomorrow morning, go to the library chamber in this temple. There you will find a sealed shrine. Open it, and inside you'll discover a chest holding a book I wrote with my own hand. Take it out, make a copy, and return it to its place. This is the book of magic that shields me from evil. It will protect Pharaoh as well it will save him from the sorceries of the Ethiopians." When Horus awoke from this vision, he knew that what he had seen was a true divine revelation. He followed every instruction from his dream without delay, returning at once to Pharaoh. He created a magical charm to ward off spells and placed it upon him. The following night, the sorceries of Horus, son of Tanaset, returned to Egypt. They tried to reach Pharaoh, but the protective spells cast by Horus, son of Penishi, prevented them. Unable to overpower the king, they fled and returned to their land within the same hour. The next morning, Pharaoh told Horus all that he had seen during the night, how the sorceries had come but failed to touch him. Then Horus summoned pure wax and shaped it into a litter with 4 bearers. He spoke powerful words over them, breathed life into them, and commanded, "Go to the land of the Negroes tonight. Bring their king back here to Egypt to stand before Pharaoh. He is to be whipped with 500 lashes in public, before Pharaoh himself. Then return him to his land, complete the task in 6 hours, no more." The magical bearers answered, "We will leave nothing undone." The sorceries of Horus, son of Penishi, rose into the sky and traveled on the winds to the land of the Negroes. That very night they seized the king, brought him back to Egypt, whipped him publicly before Pharaoh with 500 strokes, then returned him to his landall within 6 hours, no more. These tales were told by Senosiris as he stood in the center of the court, speaking before Pharaoh and his nobles, while the people of Egypt listened closely to his words. He declared, "May the wrath of Ammon, your god, fall upon you, wicked Ethiopian. Are the words I speak not those that were written in your letter?" With his head bowed, the Ethiopian replied, "Read on, for everything you say is indeed written in that letter." Senosiris continued, "After these events, Safter, the king of the land of the Negroes, had been taken and returned. Within 6 hours, he lay down and rose the next morning in terrible pain from the beating he had received in Egypt. He said to his courtiers, "What my magic did to Pharaoh, Pharaoh's magic has done to me. I was taken to Egypt during the night, beaten with 500 lashes before Pharaoh himself, and brought back to our land before dawn." He turned away from his courtiers, and they cried out in distress. Then the king summoned Horus, son of Tanaset, and said, "Beware the wrath of Ammon, bull of Meru, my god. You went to Egypt. Let us now see how you will protect me from the sorcery of Horus, son of Penishi." Horus performed his magic and placed charms on the king to shield him from the Egyptian spells. But on the second night, the magic of Horus, son of Penishi, reached the land of the Negroes once again. The king was seized and taken to Egypt, beaten again with 500 lashes in front of Pharaoh, and returned all within 6 hours. This ordeal repeated for 3 nights. Despite the efforts of the Ethiopian magicians, they could not protect their king from the power of Horus, son of Penishi. Deeply distressed, The king summoned Horus, son of Tenast, and said, "You have brought shame upon me before the Egyptians, and now you cannot even defend me. By Ammon of Meru, if you cannot defeat these magic forces, I will see you suffer a long and painful death." Terrified, Horus replied, "My lord, let me go to Egypt to see the one who casts these spells. I will face him and bring down upon him the punishment he deserves." So the king sent him to Egypt. But first, Horus went to see his mother Tonast. She asked him, "What are you planning, my son?" He answered, "The magic of Horus, son of Penishi, has overcome mine." 3 times the king has been taken to Egypt, beaten in front of Pharaoh, and returned all within 6 hours. I couldn't protect him. Now the king is furious, and unless I act, he will kill me slowly. I must go to Egypt to find the sorcerer and fight back. Tenast warned him, "Be wise, my son. Do not go where Horus, son of Peneshi, dwells. If you travel to Egypt to use your magic, beware of their people. You cannot match them. You will not return." But Horus insisted, "What you say means nothing to me. I must go to Egypt and cast my spells there." His mother then said, "If you must go, let us agree on signs between us. If you are defeated, I will come to help you. These signs will tell me of your fall. The water I drink will turn to blood. The food I eat will turn to blood, and the sky itself will appear red with blood before me." Once Horus, son of Tenast, had agreed on the signs with his mother. He set out for Egypt. After consuming his magical spells, he traveled from the sanctuary of Ammon all the way to Memphis, to the place where Pharaoh resided. There he sought the magician who had used written spells in Egypt. Upon arriving at Pharaoh's court, he raised his voice and declared, "Who here dares to cast spells against me in this court?" before Pharaoh himself, and in the presence of all Egypt. "Is it the 2 scribes from the house of life, or is it just the one who enchanted the king and brought him here, even against my power?" Hearing this, Horus, son of Panishihu, was already standing before Pharaoh, replied, "So it is you, Horus, son of Tenast, the Ethiopian adversary. Aren't you the one who tried to charm me in the gardens of Ra with your fellow Ethiopian, diving into the water and letting yourselves float beneath the eastern slope of Heliopolis? Weren't you the one who forced Pharaoh, your own master, to journey far, striking him with blows in Ethiopia? And now you've come here asking if there's anyone who can use sorcery against you. By the life of Atumu, master of Heliopolis, the gods of Egypt have brought you here so you may face justice in their land. Prepare yourself. I am coming for you." Horus, son of Tnahzit, answered, "Aren't you the one to whom I taught the saying of the jackal that curses me?" Then, drawing from his book of magic, he cast a spell that caused flames to erupt in the court. Pharaoh and the nobles cried out in fear, shouting, "Help us, Horus, son of Penishi, master of the scrolls!" Horus, son of Penishi, responded with a magical incantation that summoned southern rain from the sky, and the fire was instantly extinguished. But the Ethiopian sorcerer cast another spell, creating a massive cloud that covered the court so thickly that no one could see those around them. Horus recited another incantation, causing the cloud to disperse and calming the malevolent winds. Then Horus, son of Tenast, unleashed a third enchantment, forming an enormous stone roof 200 cubits long and 50 wide hovering above Pharaoh and his officials. His aim was to separate Egypt from its king, to divide the land from its sovereign. When Pharaoh looked up and saw the looming stone ceiling, he and all those in the court cried out in terror, Horus, son of Penishi, then chanted a powerful formula. A papyrus barge appeared, and he directed the stone roof to be placed upon it. The barge drifted away, carrying the massive stone to Egypt's great harbor. The vast lake of the land, the Ethiopian sorcerer realized he could not match the power of Egypt's magician, so he cast a spell using written magic, making himself invisible within the court of audience, intending to flee back to his homeland in the land of the blacks. But Horus, son of Penishi, spoke an incantation over him and shattered the illusion. He made the Ethiopian visible once more to Pharaoh and all those present in the court, revealing him as a pitiful little bird about to flee in panic. Horus then recited another spell, and the Ethiopian was flipped onto his back, like a captured goose with a hunter standing over him, knife in hand, ready to strike Dot. As this was happening, The signs Horus, son of Tanast, had previously arranged with his mother began to appear before her. She wasted no time. Taking the form of a goose, she flew to Egypt and hovered above Pharaoh's palace, crying out loudly to her son, who now looked like a helpless bird threatened by the hunter, Horus. Son of Panishi glanced upward and saw her. Recognizing her as Tanast, the Ethiopian sorceress, he spoke another spell. She was also turned onto her back, with a fowler poised above her, knife ready to end her life. She immediately shed her bird form and reappeared as an Ethiopian woman. She pleaded with him, saying, "Please, Horus, son of Panishi, do not strike us down for this offense. Have mercy. If you let us go with a boat, we swear never to return to Egypt again." Horus, son of Panishi, made an oath by Pharaoh and the gods of Egypt, declaring, "I will not stop my magical work unless you swear never to return to Egypt under any circumstances." Tanst raised her hand and vowed never to set foot in Egypt again for all time. Then Horus, son of Tanost, swore as well, saying, "I will not return to Egypt for 1,500 years. Satisfied, Horus, son of Panishi, lifted his spell. He gave them a boat, and both Horus, son of Tonist, and his mother Tonist departed to their homeland in the land of the blacks. Senosiris spoke these words before Pharaoh, while the people listened closely, and Satmi, his father, witnessed everything. The Ethiopian plague lay prostrate with his forehead pressed to the ground. Then Senosiris said, "By your very presence, my great lord, the man before you is Horus, son of Tanasti, same one whose deeds I've just described. He has not repented for what he did long ago, and now, after 1,500 years, he has returned to Egypt to cast his spells once more by the life of Osiris, the great god and lord of the underworld, before whom I rest. I am Horus, son of Panishi. I stand here now before Pharaoh. When I learned in the underworld that this Ethiopian enemy planned to bring sacrilege upon Egypt, and since there was no longer a worthy scribe or sage left who could oppose him, I pleaded with Osiris to let me return to earth to stop him from disgracing Egypt and claiming the land of the blacks was superior. Osiris granted permission for me to return. I came back in the form of a seed and encountered Satme, the son of Pharaoh, on the mountain near Heliopolis or Memphis. I grew inside a colochia plant to take on human form and be reborn, so I could battle the Ethiopian magician who now stands in the court. Then Horus, son of Panishi, performed a spell using written magic. Still appearing in the form of Senosiris, he summoned a fire that surrounded the Ethiopian plague and consumed him in the middle of the court, before the eyes of Pharaoh, his nobles, and the people of Egypt. When it was done, Senosiris disappeared. Like a shadow before Pharaoh and Satmi, they saw him no more. Pharaoh and his nobles were astounded beyond words by what they had witnessed. Pharaoh declared, "Never before has there been a scribe or sage equal to Horus, son of Panishi, and there never will be another like him again." Satme cried out in anguish when Senosiris vanished like a shadow and could no longer be seen. Pharaoh left the court deeply shaken by what he had seen. He ordered that Satme be honored and well cared for in recognition of his son, Senosiris, and to bring comfort to his heart. That evening, Satme returned to his home, his heart still heavy. His wife Machushkat lay beside him that night, and she conceived. She gave birth without delay to a son, whom they named Usamanther. From that time onward, Satme never failed to offer gifts and libations to the spirit of Horus, son of Panishi, ***, for a long time. Historians have recognized the legendary nature of the tale recounted by Herodotus in his second book, where he describes how Sethan, a priest of the god Vulcan, defeated the Assyrians and their king Sennacherib. Many would like to see this as the Egyptian version of the events also recorded in the Bible, in the second book of Kings, but the identity of Sethan remains uncertain. Popular tradition credited him with this miraculous victory, but we still do not know exactly who he was. King Zet, listed by Africanus at the end of the 23rd dynasty in Monato's king lists, may simply be a variant or altered reflection of the Sethan mentioned by Herodotus. So far, however, neither Assyrian nor Ethiopian records from the period provide a ruler, whose name clearly matches the Greek version. Kral was the first to propose a connection between Sethan and Satani, the son of Ramses II, who is the central figure in the two earlier stories. He introduced this idea cautiously, and it initially gained little traction among Egyptologists. It was later taken up and fully developed by Griffith, who examined the theory in detail. After considering the arguments carefully, it seems quite likely that this identification may be correct. If that's the case, then Herodotus preserved the core theme of one of the earliest surviving stories about Satni Kumo Estat in this tale. Satni does not rely on the magical powers that later legends so abundantly attribute to him. Instead, it is his devotion and piety that bring about victory. This story is not part of a magical cycle, but rather belongs to a group of narratives meant to justify the priest's opposition to the military elite after the fall of the Ramesside dynasty. These stories promote the superiority of theocratic rule over other forms of government. Even if the feudal aristocracy withheld its support from a priest-king, divine protection alone was enough to grant victory. It is this divine aid granted to a makeshift force of faithful townspeople or craftsmen that saved Egypt from invasion, rather than the might of a professional army. After the reign of Enisis, a priest of Hephaestus named Sethen became king of Egypt. Sethen held little regard for Egypt's warrior class, believing he had no need for their services. Among other insults, he stripped them of their estates' land grants of 12 urs, each that had been bestowed by previous kings. Later, Sennacheribus, king of the Arabs and Assyrians, launched a massive invasion of Egypt. But when the Egyptian soldiers refused to fight, Sethen found himself powerless. Desperate, he went into the temple and wept before the statue of his god, grieving over the disaster that seemed inevitable. As he cried, sleep overtook him, and in a dream the god appeared. To him, the deity encouraged him, telling him not to fear, promising that nothing would go wrong in the coming battle, and that divine help would be sent. Trusting in the vision, Sethen gathered those Egyptians who were still willing to fight not soldiers, but merchants, craftsmen, and common townspeople. He led them to Pelusium, the gateway to Egypt. The professional warriors remained behind. As the enemy army approached and prepared to lay siege, a strange event occurred. During the night, a swarm of field mice invaded the enemy camp. They chewed through the leather of their quivers, gnawed their bowstrings, and even destroyed the straps of their shields. The following day, the enemy was left without weapons. Panic spread, and many were killed as they fled in disarray. Today, a statue of King Sethen still stands in the temple of Hephaestus. In his hand, he holds a mouse. The inscription beneath it reads, "Whoever looks upon me, let him show reverence to the god." The tale of this unusual story is inscribed on a stela found in the Temple of Khonsu at Thebes. It was discovered by Champollion and later removed in 1846 by Pris Devon, who donated it to the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. The inscription received considerable scholarly attention. Champollion examined it closely, and parts of the text were quoted in his works. A detailed translation and reproduction were prepared for the Universal Exhibition of 1855 under the supervision of Emmanuel de Rouge. Around the same time, two major translations appeared, one by Birch and another by de Rouge, both of which contributed to early understandings of the text. Subsequent scholars initially added little beyond what de Rouge had already established. His interpretation was broadly accepted by others in the field, including Bruch, who incorporated it into his historical studies of Egypt. At first glance, the story has the appearance of an official royal document. It begins with a formal royal protocol naming a king whose throne name and birth name match those of Ramses II, also known as Sesostris. Throughout the inscription, there are specific dates, detailed descriptions of the royal cult, and ceremonial procedures, all presented with such precision that the text was long believed to be a genuine historical record. Scholars once placed the events during the reign of Ramesses from the 20th dynasty and even attempted to locate the land of Baktan, which had supposedly provided Egypt with a queen. However, Egyptologist Adolf Erman later argued persuasively that the stela was a fabrication. He suggested that the priests of Khonsu created the story to glorify their god and secure tangible benefits for their temple. According to this view, the inscription was never intended as a historical record, but as a religious and political tool. Erman demonstrated that the authors of the forgery intentionally linked the story of spirit possession to Ramses, to freeing us from the need to accept the existence of an otherwise unknown pharaoh. He dated the composition of the text to around the Ptolemaic period, although I believe it could more likely be placed in the middle of the Ethiopian invasions. This was a time when the role of high priest of Ammon had lapsed, and the remaining priesthoods would have been eager to reclaim the vast influence once wielded by the now-defunct religious authority. Since then, the text has been translated into English and German. The narrative itself follows a theme common in folklore. A spirit inhabits the body of a princess, resists attempts by exorcists to remove it, and agrees to depart only under specific conditions. The Egyptian version offers us what is likely the oldest and simplest form of this tale. Other versions, reworked within Christian frameworks, have also been identified. One modern Egyptologist even used the story as the basis for a fictional account. Within the original text, Ehrman noted that the authors attempted to mimic archaic language, but they made several notable grammatical errors. It's clear the priests of Khonsu were trying to imitate the style of an earlier age, but they couldn't consistently maintain that illusion. Sometimes, their efforts to sound ancient led them to use incorrect forms, mistaking them for genuine archaisms. Their sentence structures are clumsy, their ideas poorly expressed, and their phrasing terse and repetitive. Moreover, they inaccurately portray a king from the 19th dynasty Ramses II as using political practices more typical of 20th dynasty rulers. Though Ramses II was deeply religious, he did not feel compelled to consult the gods on every state decision. That tradition only began with the later successors of Ramses III, who frequently sought guidance from the statue of Ammon. Despite these issues, the text is relatively straightforward to interpret. With careful reading, it can be translated with ease and offers excellent material for students new to Egyptology. Much like the tale of the two brothers, at the top of the stela is a carved scene that visually represents one of the stories. Key moments. On the left side, the sacred bark of Khonsu, known as the Good Counselor, is shown being carried on the shoulders of 8 figures. 2 priests follow behind, reading prayers aloud. Standing before the bark, the king offers incense in a ritual act of reverence. On the right side, a second, smaller bark appears, this one belonging to Khonsu, the god who governs destiny in Thebes. It is supported by just 4 men due to its smaller size. A priest named Khonsu-Hanu-Turnebet, the prophet of Khonsu, who controls destinies in Thebes, is shown offering incense to this second bark. This scene likely depicts the return of the second Khonsu to Thebes. The first Khonsu arrives to greet the second, and both the king and priest are shown paying equal homage to their respective manifestations of the god. Horus, the mighty bull, crowned with diadems, and firmly established in his kingship, like the god Adam Horus, victorious over Nubity, powerful with the sword, and destroyer of foreign enemies. The king of Upper and Lower Egypt, Usemarius Sotopenria, son of the sun, Ria Masasu Mamanu, beloved of Amanu, lord of Karnak, and of the divine circle of Theban gods. He is the good god, son of Ammon, born of Mut, begotten by Harmachis, the glorious child of the universal Lord, begotten by a god who was the husband of his own mother. He is the king of Egypt and ruler of the desert tribes, sovereign over foreign lands. From the moment he was born, he led military campaigns, commanding bravery, even while still in the womb. Like a bull charging ahead for this king is like a bull. A god who rises on the day of battle like Montu, valiant like the son of Nut, while his majesty was in Naharina as part of his annual custom. The princes of all lands came before him, bearing heavy offerings for the spirits of his majesty. Its fortresses brought tribute gold, silver, lapis lazuli, malachite, and all the fragrant woods of Arabia carried on their backs in orderly processions. Among them was the prince of Bactrin, who sent his tribute and placed his eldest daughter at the head of the procession to greet his majesty and ask for his blessing. Because she was remarkably beautiful and greatly pleased the king, he named her great royal spouse Nefru. Upon returning to Egypt, she fulfilled all the duties of a royal wife. In the 15th year of his reign, on the 22nd day of the month of Pani, his majesty was in Thebes, the majestic queen of cities. Honoring his father Amun-Ra of Karnak during the grand festival at southern Thebes, the god's favored dwelling since creation. Then someone came to inform the king. A messenger has arrived from the prince of Bactrin, with many gifts for the royal spouse. Brought before the king, the messenger offered his gifts and saluted his majesty, saying, "Glory to you, O son of foreign lands, through whom we live." After showing his reverence, he addressed the king again. "I come to you, my lord, because of Bintrachet, the younger sister of the royal spouse Nef. She is afflicted by a mysterious illness that grips her entire body. Please, let your majesty send a wise man to see her." The king replied, "Bring me the scribes of the double house of life who serve in the palace." When they arrived, his majesty said, "I've summoned you to hear this request. Send me one among you who is truly wise, a scribe skilled both in heart and hand." The royal scribe Thothomhabi was chosen and brought before the king, who ordered him to travel to Bakhtin with the messenger. When Thothomhabi reached Bakhtin, he found that Bintrachet was possessed by a spirit, one hostile and difficult to confront. Unable to resolve the issue, the Prince of Bakhtin sent a second message to his majesty, saying, "My lord, please command a god to be sent to battle this spirit." When the messenger arrived before his majesty in the 23rd year, on the first day of Pachons during the feast of Ammon, while the king was at Thebes, his majesty spoke once more in the presence of Khonsu of Thebes, the god of good counsel, saying, "Great lord, I come again before you because of the daughter of the Prince of Bakhtin." Then Khonsu of Thebes, god of good counsel, was spiritually united with Khonsu, who governs destinies, the great god who repels foreign forces. His majesty said to Khonsu of Thebes, "Great lord, may you turn your gaze to Khonsu, who governs destinies, the great god who drives out foreigners. Let him be sent to Bakhtin." The god nodded twice in strong agreement. Then his majesty said, "Grant him your power, so I may send the majesty of this god to Bakhtin to heal the daughter of the prince." Khonsu of Thebes again nodded twice and transferred his magical power to Khonsu, who governs destinies in Thebes. 4 times in total, his majesty then ordered that Khonsu, who governs destinies, be sent on a grand bark accompanied by 5 smaller boats, along with chariots and many horses flanking him on both sides. When the god finally arrived at Bakhtin, a journey of 1 year and 5 months, the prince came out with his soldiers and generals to greet Khonsu, who governs destinies. He bowed to the ground and said, "You have come to us in accordance with the will of the king of the 2 lands, Maria Sotopanria." As soon as the god reached the place where Bintrachet lay, he performed his magical rites for the prince's daughter, and she was immediately healed. The possessing spirit spoke in the presence of Khonsu, who governs destinies, saying, "Come in peace, great god, who drives away foreigners. Bakhtin is your city, its people are your servants, and I too am your servant. I will return to the place I came from to satisfy your will in this matter. But let your majesty declare a feast day in my honor, and in honor of the Prince of Bakhtin." Khonsu nodded in approval to his prophet, indicating that the prince should make a great offering to the spirit. While this interaction unfolded between Khonsu and the ghost, the Prince of Bakhtin and his army stood in fearful awe. After the offering was made before Khonsu and the spirit, and the feast was held in their honor, the spirit departed in peace to a place of his choosing. As commanded by Khonsu, who governs destinies in Thebes, the Prince of Bakhtin was overjoyed, as were all the people of his land. He thought to himself, "Since this god has come to Bakhtin, I will not send him back to Egypt." So the god remained in Bakhtin for 3 years and 9 months. But one night, as the prince lay sleeping, he had a dream. He saw the god leave his shrine, taking the form of a golden sparrowhawk that flew toward Egypt. When the prince awoke, he was trembling with fear. He said to the prophet of Khonsu, who governs destinies in Thebes, "The god who has stayed with us desires to return to Egypt. Let his chariot take him home." The prince agreed to let the god depart and sent him off with generous gifts of all kinds and a strong escort of soldiers and horses. When the god arrived back in Thebes, he went to the temple of Khonsu, the good counselor. There, in the presence of Khonsu of Thebes, he laid down all the gifts he had received from the Prince of Bakhtin, keeping nothing for himself. And so Khonsu, the good counselor of Thebes, returned peacefully to his temple in the 23rd year, on the 19th day of Mecher, during the reign of King Usim, who lives forever like the sun. Asterisk, asterisk, as noted earlier in the general introduction to these stories. The figure of Ramses II was divided by tradition into 2 separate characters. One was named Senosiris, derived from his popular name, Senosiris, which appears on several monuments. The other was known as Ozymandias, or Ozymandias, a name taken from his royal title, Eusomeria. The name Senosiris and the legends surrounding him have their roots in Memphis. This version of the story likely developed, or at least became associated, with a group of 6 statues that stood before the Temple of Ptah in Memphis. Local temple guides would show these statues to visitors, claiming they depicted the great Egyptian conqueror, along with his wife and 4 sons. When Herodotus recorded this tale in his history, he copied it faithfully, without realizing it was essentially a piece of popular storytelling. What appeared to be historical details were actually just narrative devices used to support various fictional episodes. If we strip away the commentary added by Herodotus, the parts of the story given the most emphasis are the descriptions of how Senosiris treated conquered peoples and how he narrowly escaped death near Pelusium upon his return to Egypt. The first takes up more than half of one chapter, while the second fills another entirely. The way his return is described, along with the dramatic events surrounding it, suggests this may have been the central theme of the story. While we can't be absolutely certain, it's likely that the original Egyptian version was structured similarly to the Greek summary. Herodotus may not have included every detail he heard, but his condensed version still gives us a fairly clear sense of the main storyline. At its core, the tale seems to have been created to explain the origin of Egypt's canal system and its land ownership laws. Since people could not easily grasp the long historical development that led to these institutions, they imagined a single ruler who had accomplished in a few years what had actually taken centuries. As warfare was thought to provide the labor needed for such grand works, Senosiris was sent to conquer the world. Into this basic framework, other well-known themes were added, such as accounts of commemorative, Stele, and the treacherous fire at Daphne. The idea of a deadly banquet, which appears in the story, was already familiar in Egyptian lore. We know of at least 2 similar tales. One where Setiphon murders his brother Osiris upon his return from conquest, and another in which Queen Nitocris takes revenge on her brother's killers with a similar feast. In short, these various story elements were combined by temple guides and storytellers into a single compelling narrative to entertain and impress visitors at the temple of Ptah. King Senosiris first set sail from the Arabian Gulf with a fleet of large ships and conquered the coastal peoples along the Erythraean Sea. He advanced until the sea became too shallow for navigation, at which point he turned back and returned to Egypt. From there, he gathered a large army and marched overland, subjugating every nation he encountered. When Senosiris came across a people who showed bravery and fought hard to defend their freedom, he honored them by raising stele in their lands. These monuments bore the name of the people, the name of their country, and a record of how he had brought them under his rule. However, if he took a town without resistance, he inscribed the same basic information on their stele, but also added a symbol of femininity, marking them as cowardly in the eyes of posterity. His campaigns stretched across vast territories until he crossed from Asia into Europe, conquering both the Scythians and the Thracians. Afterward, he turned back and made his way home. On his return to Egypt, Senosiris brought with him many captives from the nations he had defeated. As he neared the city of Daphne, close to Pelusium, his brother whom he had left in charge of, Egypt invited him and his children to a feast. But this was a trap. His brother had the house surrounded with wood and set it on fire while they were inside. When Senosiris realized what was happening, he quickly consulted his wife, who had accompanied him. She advised that, of their 6 sons, they should lay 2 of them across the burning furnace to form a human bridge so that the rest could escape over their bodies. Senosiris followed her advice. 2 of his sons perished in the flames, but he and the remaining children survived. After avenging himself on his treacherous brother, Senosiris made use of the prisoners he had taken during his campaigns. These captives were forced to move massive stone blocks for construction projects, especially for the Temple of Hephaestus. They also dug out the network of canals that still exist in Egypt. As a result of their labor, Egypt, once easily navigated by horse and chariot, became difficult to traverse, and from that time on, horses and chariots were no longer used in the country. Senosiris then divided the land among the Egyptian people, assigning each person a rectangular plot of equal size. By lottery, he established a taxation system based on this distribution, requiring every citizen to pay an annual tax. If part of someone's land was lost due to the Nile's flooding, that person could report it directly to the king. Officials would then assess the loss and adjust the tax accordingly, so no one was charged more than their fair share based on what remained. Senosiris was also the only king of Egypt known to have ruled over Ethiopia. Diodorus of Sicily Bucai, chapters 53 to 58, provides a version of the Senosiris story that follows Herodotus, but has been revised and expanded by later historians to make it less fanciful. For example, in the scene at the banquet in Pelusium, Diodorus omits the gruesome detail found in Herodotus that Senosiris sacrificed 2 of his sons to escape the fire. Likely considering it too barbaric, Diodorus replaces this with a more refined version, the king, raising his hands, prays to the gods for the safety of his children and wife, and then crosses the flames himself. Additionally, Diodorus, or more accurately, the Alexandrian author, from whom he borrowed, is as a shortened form of the king's name, instead of the longer Sesistris used by the interpreters of Herodotus. He opts for the more concise Senosiris.